Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to our second LinkedIn Live, in which we have Jeroen van Pelt and Tim Firkins from Dover Fueling Solutions. Jeroen, Tim, are you both excited to discuss all things Wetstock management?
Very much, yeah.
Brilliant. Why don't we start with the basics? Can you tell us about Wetstock management, what it is, and why it should be a key part of any fuel retail operation?
Yeah, sure. So I'll take that one. So I think a good starting point when talking about Wetstock management is to address a few misconceptions that we sometimes see. So first of all, what do we mean by Wetstock management? Some people, when they use the term Wetstock management, they use it to refer to tank gauging, for example. Some people might use it to refer to basic reconciliation processes. When we use the term Wetstock management, we are using it to refer to a system and a service which uses real-time data to help us to reduce fuel losses, to lower overall operational costs, to improve margins, and where relevant, to also help keep fuel retailers legally compliant as well. How do we do that? Well, there are a number. If we look at the diagram we're showing on screen now, there's a number of different areas on a station where we can lose fuel, or where we can look like we're losing fuel. Another misconception that we see when talking about Wetstock management is that people think, oh, I've got my Wetstock under control, I've got my variances under control, there's no problems going on. Actually, what this diagram on screen shows us is that actually there's a whole host of different areas where, as I say, we can either lose fuel or look like we're losing fuel. This is not exhaustive, what we're showing here, but we're categorizing fuel loss into a couple of different areas. Firstly, what we would refer to as perceived loss, or we might call this apparent losses of fuel. So these are areas of loss on a station, or areas of data anomalies on a station, which make it look like you're losing fuel, but the fuel is still physically there in the tank. A great example of this, for those who are familiar with it, is tank calibration. When you have poor tank calibration, depending on where you are in the reconciliation cycle, in the delivery cycle, it can lead to an impression of a fuel loss on a particular day, or even an impression of a gain on a particular day. Either way, it's an inaccuracy in your data, but the fuel is still physically there in the tank. And these are things that's important to know about. They can hurt you financially if they get written off as losses, for example. But more important than those are actual losses of fuel. And those are actual losses which hurt you financially, such as thefts, for example, or over-dispensing meters in your pumps. And of course, even more importantly than that, are actual losses of fuel which hurt you environmentally, or hurt everybody environmentally, and can lead to public relations issues, maybe federal fines, that kind of thing. So those obviously being leaks. So if we put all of these things together, our perceived losses and our actual losses, we get a whole array of areas on a station where we can lose fuel, or look like we're losing fuel. And it's really important to be able to identify those things. So coming back to your question, what is Wetstock management? Wetstock management to us is a service which allows you to identify these things that we see here on the screen and more as quickly as possible after they happen, in near real time where possible, to be able to quantify the impact they're having. So if you have a meter in a dispenser which is over dispensing, how much is it over dispensing by? If you have a leak in a line, how much are you losing? And then, of course, most importantly, to be able to recommend and drive the corrective action that you need to take in order to reduce or eliminate that loss. So it's all about essentially identifying actionable insight in your data to allow you ultimately to get to the point where we can reduce losses. That's what Wetstock management is all about.
Thank you, Tim.
And Jeroen, can you go into a bit more detail about how Wetstock management works in practice? What data is needed and how is it collected?
Yes. like Tim already said, so Wetstock management is based on data analytics. So the first step is that we need to gather data from the forecourt, but also around the forecourt. So we're typically looking for data like stock levels, alarms, water levels, but also delivery data and transactional data, all coming together to do Wetstock analysis. So the way how we collect that data is actually what we call device agnostic. So we can gather the data if there is a DFS equipment on site, like the ProGaze or the Fusion or the Prisma, then we can collect the data via what we call a Wetstock onboard bubble. If not, then we have another way to collect the data by a specific software data collector that can be installed on a device on site. But if that device is not available, then of course you can also provide the device to make sure that we can collect the data in the right way. So if we have the data collected, then we run it through the machine. So we run several algorithms and also statistical tools, all analyzing the data and making information out of that. And that information then is basically used to deliver the service to the customer. We have several different service levels. It starts with visibility. So the lowest level of Wetstock management is actually giving visibility to the customer or to the station owner of what is happening on his site. We do that via interactive dashboards and some other reports that we can provide. Then we can scale it up a bit and we can go to what we call the daily reconciliation service and leak detection. So this is where we already start to collect daily data and make analytics around it to give full reconciliation to the end customer. And then we can even scale it up to what we call the real-time analytics, where we have a specialist data analyst working the data from the customer, finding issues on site and also creating actionable items to do. And to work together with the customer to increase the efficiency on site and of course, minimize the fuel losses. So these are in a nutshell how we do it practically.
Yeah, it sounds like implementing a Wetstock management service really is simple for DFS customers. What else makes DFS Wetstock management different?
Well, DFS has two major brands under this umbrella, Fairbanks and Clearview. Those were already started in the 90s, I believe, where they started to provide Wetstock service to the fuel retail industry. And during that period, they developed what we like to call the basic, the standard tools and processes to do Wetstock management. They have over more than 30 years of experience, of course, and under DFS, they come together under one umbrella, DFS Wetstock Management. And we started to bring those algorithms, this know-how into a new tool, what we call the DX Wetstock, where we actually take the best of two worlds and combine that and evolution of the software into a new package. That's how we work. We also we provide a managed service to many of our customers. We do that either direct, but also we have many business partners around the world where we can provide the service to local customers in the local language and local time zone. We always say, well, it is a global service, but provided locally. And I think that's very important to our customers to make sure that they get the best out of the service.
Yeah, I agree.
So what kind of results or return on investment can fuel retailers expect if they invest in Wetstock management?
That's a great question, and that is a question that we get a lot. So I mentioned earlier about identifying those sources of loss with the ultimate aim of reducing them or eliminating them completely. One question we often ask prospective customers when we're talking to them about Wetstock management is, what would the impact be if we could reduce your losses by just a fraction of a percent? So just say 1/10 of a percent, 0.1%, for example. And the answer is normally that would have a really significant impact. Needless to say, on a station that does 3 million litres per annum, your saving would be 3,000 litres. So theoretically, we would always look to be making savings such as that. But we recently ran a proof of concept in a new market in a country we hadn't been operating in before, just to see if we could prove out some of these numbers. That country is one which has some quite stringent regulations around variances. There is a set variance, a tolerance, which fuel retailers need to keep within. We thought that would mean that actually in that case that maybe results would be limited for us. However, we found in this case, and this is what we're sharing with you on screen in this case study here, and we have put this together into a more detailed case study, which I think we'll talk about at the end as well. We found that in this case that actually our findings were really, really compelling. So if we look at what we did during that proof of concept, and we're sharing this by way of example, that was a proof of concept that we ran on 10 stations in the country over a period of around 6 months. And across those 10 stations, through finding leaks, through finding over-dispensing fuel meters, we were able to find losses which would equate to around 66,000 litres per year. So when we bear in mind that these findings are on stations which on the surface looked like they were performing okay, when we start to scratch the surface and we look at the data which tells us what's going on below ground, we're able to see actually that things were far from okay. So 39,000 litres of fuel over a period of a year would have been lost to ground by way of those 4 leaks. If we hadn't been able to intervene. 27,000 litres of fuel given away over dispensing meters. So these are real findings which could lead to real actions to eliminate those things. And when we look at that, we were able to identify savings of over 500,000 euros in estimated savings in cleanup costs and other associated costs with those leaks in particular. So when we take data like that and we think, okay, well, what would that look like in terms of return on investment? We were able to calculate if we took that kind of data set and we put it across an average network of say 100 sites. We look at a 3-year deployment of the service across those 100 sites. You can see from the numbers we have on screen here that we estimate a net saving of over 700,000 euros for a network like that, and a return on investment of nearly 250%. This is a great extreme example. This is one of our best examples. But what we always say is, okay, well, even if we can't achieve this, even if we could only achieve half of this, the return on investment is huge. The return on investment on wet stock management will always be really, really strong. One other thing I want to mention from this proof of concept, which is a bit harder to kind of quantify the impact of in terms of savings, but I think really easy to understand the impact of, is around alarm management as well. One of the issues that fuel retailers tend to have with knowing what's going on their stations is the fact that there's so many pieces of equipment, tank gauges and other equipment, which are generating so many different alarms, so much noise. What we found in this particular case was that actually we only had to escalate around 5%. In fact, less than 5% of the alarms that we received, we only had to escalate less than 5% of them. What that means is we've filtered out through our service some 95% of the noise that's going on. And that's allowed our partner in country and the fuel retailers themselves to really act upon the important things, the things they really needed to act upon, and not get distracted by the noise. Now, again, that's an extreme example. We would normally expect to filter out some kind of 80 to 85% of the noise. But either way, we end in a situation where we have the tangible savings, and we have the maybe slightly less tangible, more intangible savings. And this proof of concept, I think, really proved that. And the case study that we can share goes into some more detail on that. So I hope that gives you a flavour of the kind of return on investment and why a fuel retailer might be interested in investing in a service like this.
Yeah, I mean, that's some really amazing data, I would say. Are there some additional resources viewers can access or next steps they can take if they're interested to learn more?
Yeah, so and through all the years of experience and know-how that we build up is something that we want to share with our customers, of course. So there are case studies like Tim explained on this one, but also white papers that we put together and that are available to our customers and to our basically the wider industry. You can share that, or we can download it from the website. But of course, if there is really a need to discuss in more detail, you can contact us directly or via the website. So there are several ways.
Thank you. Well, this has been very insightful. So fingers crossed you'll join us for any future ones. Unless there's anything else you'd like to highlight that we might have missed, Sarah and I would like to thank you both for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.